Hey up, now then, how are you doing? Welcome back to the Yorkshire Bike Mechanics YouTube channel. My name's Dave K. I hope you're all well, wherever you are in this world, and it's freezing again. We're on the 14th of June and we've still no decent weather. It's mad. Anyway, moving on. Today's video, if I were to say to you Magura MT7 brakes or MT brakes, you'd go, ooh, I'm not bleeding them. Well, I'm going to show you how to do it today, the most successful way that I've found from years and years of doing them, and I hope it's going to help you when you come to bleed yours. Now, a lot of people will say, right, these are a nightmare brake to bleed, and to be honest, they are. They're the worst brakes to bleed throughout the whole range, not just Shimano, but all the others that are on the market. Magura brakes are the most tricky to bleed. I'm not sure why that is, to be honest. They seem to be susceptible to any tiny little bit of air anywhere in that system that feels spongy and soft. Now, I did a little bit of a video on this a while ago, and since then I've kind of played and tried to look at different ways we can do these. And I'm hoping that you're going to find it much easier to do these. It's a much better way. So, let's crack on. Right then, so some people are put off these brakes, but I really like them. I think they're a good brake. I think the reason why they're put off is a couple of things. First of all, the lever is kind of a strong ABS plastic. I think that's the reason why a lot of people are put off. And secondly, I think they realise that they're quite hard to look after and quite hard to maintain. They are one hell of a brake to bleed. And so from that point of view, I think people generally stay away from them, or they take them to somebody else to actually bleed them. Once you get the hang of bleeding and you understand the method behind it, then it's fairly straightforward, but you need to get that right first. But once you've got that right, you will be amazed at the end result that you get when bleeding these brakes this way. They're actually really, really good. So there's a few bits of equipment or tools, if you like, to be able to bleed these brakes. Now, it's really important that you have these tools and the right tools, otherwise you won't have much success. The first thing, obviously, which we've just shown you, is the T25 Torx bit. So the second thing that you're going to need is two 20mm medical syringes. Now, we buy these from Amazon. We buy them in the box full because we go through them like nobody's business. We don't reuse them. Once they've been used once, we throw them away. So we need two 20mm syringes. One of them has a piece of silicone tubing on the end, and this little adapter is specific to these brakes. Okay, it's a Magura adapter, and it's really important that you get the right adapter, and it's got a little O-ring on the end to keep them sealed. So this is the bit that we're actually going to put on the caliper end. So the other one we're going to take to bits and we're going to use at the top end of the bike on the lever. So first thing that we need to do is just undo the bleed port, screw this little bad boy in, and then we'll go from there. But let's get some towel or some toweling or something like that to catch any fluid that comes out. So it doesn't really matter whether you actually take the pads out or you leave them in. I prefer to actually leave them in, but this is best done with a pair of new pads. You can do it with old pads in, but there's a different method. So we'll assume that these pads are actually new. So at the moment, the lever bleed screw is closed, so it will not let any air or fluid run back down out of this bleed screw. You might get a little bit, but there won't be a load. So just unscrew that, get a little bit of towel just to catch the bit. There's not a lot in there. It won't run like mad out of your caliper because there's nothing open at the other end. Screw your adapter in there. That's it, just hand tight for now. Take your towel away and then just use an 8mm spanner or however big it is just to nip that up. Not too much, you'll feel when it starts to nip up. That's it. Now if you've noticed, I've no fluid in this syringe, which is how I want it to be before we start. So the next thing that we need to do, now that we've got that on there and it's perfectly sealed and there's no air or fluid can leak out of there, let's go up to the top end. So what we're going to need for the lever end, we've got us other syringe here, which obviously we need to take out of the packet. And then the plunger inside we're going to take out, because that's the bit that we don't need. This is the bit that we actually need at the lever end. What we need to do basically is just undo one of these screws just slightly, enough to lift the lever up to about there. Okay, and then the Torx 2025 is in the plastic bleed screw. We just undo that. There'll be no fluid coming out of there. And we put that to one side. The next thing that we need to do is get us 20mm syringe, just the outer casing. And we need to push it into the hole and just make sure it's quite secure in the hole. So doing it this way, make sure that there's always a full complement of fluid in the syringe. There's no air going to be able to get in there, only fluid can actually get in there, and we use this to keep the system topped up while we extract it or pull it out at the caliper side. So we've put that in there. What we need to do is just need to top that up with Magura Royal Blood. Now it's important that you use this stuff, particularly on newish brakes, because if not, you'll invalidate the warranty. So you need around about 3/4 of a 20mm syringe in there. And if you notice, it's not going anywhere because there's nowhere for it to go, because we've got a syringe at the bottom end and we're not pulling on it. So we'll leave that as it is. You might better just flick your lever and feel or rather see a few bubbles coming out. All that's doing basically is topping up the reservoir in the lever. We can do that until they start to disappear. Okay, so now we've got that settled in there, what we need to do is go down to the caliper end. So what we're going to do at this caliper end, we're going to actually pull some of that fluid from the syringe at the top into this syringe at the back end. So we just gently pull and you'll see that fluid come up there. You don't need to pull too much through, because otherwise you're going to empty the syringe at the top. Okay, so just pull a little bit through and then push it back up into the syringe at the top. Very, very gently, backwards and forwards, just pulling that fluid out. And then what we need to do is go up to the top end and squeeze the brake lever until it touches the bar and keep it there. And then the syringe on the caliper, while we've got us lever back to the bar, the syringe on the caliper, we're going to create a vacuum in the syringe by pulling it up with his finger and his thumb. And then when we get it about halfway, we're going to let go of the lever. And you'll see fluid rushing up, plus air, into that syringe. We'll push it back down again, round about to the bottom, okay? And then we pull the lever again and keep it against the bar and pull the syringe up, creating negative pressure, then let go of the lever while you've got that negative pressure in your syringe. And you will see that any air in that system has now gone. It's gone into the syringe. Now what I can actually do is I can actually leave the syringe there. It's important that you leave it obviously up, otherwise you don't want to go that way, otherwise air is going to go back in. So essentially what you're doing is you're pulling fluid backwards and forwards from the syringe at the top into the syringe at the bottom and vice versa. You must keep the lever pressed and put some negative pressure in that syringe, otherwise you won't get all the air out of the system. Now here comes the tricky bit. Once you've actually pushed that backwards and forwards and you've not let any air in through the top of the syringe, through the tube, obviously you've kept the syringe vertical, it's on to the next step. This is a little bit more trickier. So we'll stand the camera up and I'll show you how we go ahead and do that. So I've tried to get the bike in a camera shot where you can see most or if not all of the bike, just to try and explain this next process. Now the reason why we have to do it this way is because the back caliper has an open bleed port. And what I mean by that is if you take that bleed port out of the caliper, fluid is going to come pouring out of the caliper. It's not like a Shimano caliper where you can put your tube or your syringe on end and then you can lock it off and take your syringe off. This you can't. You take the bleed port out and all the oil comes pouring out. And this is quite a difficult process, and this what makes it so difficult for a lot of people. So you've got to try and then understand the physics of fluid and how fluid flows. Now, if I were to tip the bike frontwards forward, eventually it would actually bring the level of the syringe on the right-hand side here, the same level as the caliper on the back. So if we open that bleed port, essentially no fluid would flow either way because it's exactly on a level. Until we start tipping the bike up backwards, and then what's going to happen is that naturally the fluid from the syringe is going to run down the hose, and it's going to fall out of the bleed port at the back. If we tip it away the other way, it's going to fall from the caliper out through the system, and it's going to start to fill the syringe up at the top end, providing that the caliper on the back is higher. Now, in order to do this right, we've got to take the caliper off the frame because it has to be on its side. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so let's take the caliper off the mount. Now, don't forget, we're hoping that I've got the angles right here and the fluid is neither flowing backwards or forwards. I might be a little bit out because obviously I'm going by the rack of the eye, if you like, to see which is level, to get it as level as I possibly can. So I'll take this off, turn it on its side, okay, and there we are. There's the syringe. I'll just pull that little bubble back out. Okay, so the aim now is to undo this bleed port and the fluid be sat at the top, or just start to go below, depending on if this is lower than the actual lever. So I'll get my spanner, get some toweling. Okay. Now don't forget that if you're doing this with your pads in, then you need to be very careful that you're not going to get any fluid on your pads. Now, I'm not telling you whether to do this with or without pads, because it is entirely up to you. I'm going to get a rousting now from all you lot saying, take your pads out. So it's entirely up to you how you want to do it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to very gingerly take this bleed port says off this caliper says, and I'm gonna, okay. Now I can see, I wish you could see there, but the bleed port, the fluid in the bleed port is just starting to rise in the caliper. That means that obviously this is slightly lower than the lever. So I'm just going to lift the back end up slightly until it starts to sink back down. And it's just starting to sink back down into the bleed port hole. You can actually just see it brimming. See if I can bring it in. I don't know whether you can see that. If I try and... I'll try and get that. So you might be able to just see that fluid brimming the top of the bleed port. Now I can actually make it flow out if I drop the caliper down, up, or if I lift the caliper up, it's going to go back in the hole. So I can control where that fluid is. Now, there is no air in that caliper whatsoever, not one bit. So what I need to do is, I need to put the bleed screw back in the caliper. So it's just brimming. Just gently just screw that in. And then just lock it off. Give it a good, making sure it's tight, and just gradually get that fluid away. And you can see how I've actually done that. There's no fluid leaked out or anything. It's not gone onto the pads. It's not actually run down the caliper or anything like that. So what we need to do now basically is put that caliper back on the mount, okay, and then we can come up to the top end of the bike. I'll just screw this on. Now it's important that when we put this caliper back on, we make sure that it's central on the rotor. And you can do that just by looking down to make sure that rotor is exactly in the centre of the slots where it runs through. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do basically is we need to centralise these pads in here. We need to make sure that each particular piston is going to come out at the same time and apply the same pressure as what the others do at the other side. And we can do that by using either a small picker or a blunt small screwdriver round the back. But you must be careful here to not to damage anything in there. But you must be careful not to damage the pistons or anything in there. So you need to be really careful how you actually do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lever these pads off each piston. In the corners, so I know that's completely out of the way of the pistons, and I'm going to use the lever on the bar to squeeze to make sure that I'm getting them in the right distance apart. Okay, and you can listen that I'm flicking the lever as well as just adjusting those pads to make sure that they're all coming out at the same time. And it runs freely. The wheel runs freely through the caliper. Okay, so once we've done that, we can just knit these up. So here we've got a stringe on the top, and we can see that we've already got a nice hard brake there already. So we can adjust this bike point. It's quite close to the bar. Okay, and just to feel that, that's amazing. That lever is amazing. And the only reason why that lever is so hard is because we've actually followed that process. We've got all the air out of the system. We've managed to lock off the bleed port without anything getting in there, any air or anything, and the fluid's right at the top. And we've still got as a syringe on the top, so it's just filling any particular spot in the lever that hasn't any fluid. It's just gradually topping it up as we flick the lever. If we flick the lever, we can generally get a better feel as well. Just get Ryan to come and have a feel of this lever, see what he thinks. Come and have a feel of this lever. What do you reckon?
Not a hope, is it?
You can tell Ryan likes Hope brakes. But I mean, I'm a Magura fan. I like Magura brakes. I think you get a tremendous amount of power from them. They just take a little bit of looking after. So there you go. That's how to bleed a brake, a Magura brake. So there you go. So we'll take this syringe off the top now. And what we generally do is get a little bit of cloth, get ready to put a thumb underneath. Yes, I should use gloves. And you can see that the actual fluid on the top of the bleed port on the lever is just brimming, which is exactly how we want it to be. Bleed screw back in the top very carefully, not to over tighten it because it is only plastic. Give it a little wipe and a spray with alcohol. Beautiful. So that is how to bleed Magura brakes. Not as straightforward as you might have thought. Maybe you thought it were a little bit easier than that, but it's not. It's quite a difficult process. But you must follow that process to actually get the result that you wanted. The lever on this bike, the rear lever on this bike is super hard, which is how you want it to be. The front brake, you follow exactly the same process. The caliper needs to come off right up to the lever, so again you can actually get that on a level, but you follow exactly the same process. Pull the lever back, get some negative pressure going in the syringe and let the lever go, and you'll see all those bubbles pull back into the syringe. It's a good process if you're really struggling with your Magura brakes. So that's how it's done. The Dave K, Dr. Dave style, the Yorkshire bike mechanic style. That's how you bleed a Magura brake. We've got some brilliant videos coming up. We've got a couple of bikes to review, which I'm really looking forward to. So please subscribe and click the bell and share as well. And we'll see you next time. Toodle pip.